Hey guys, this is for my seniors in disco. I hope you all got the email. I moved the due date for your assignment to Friday. So make sure you have a couple of extra days. So make sure you hand that in. On well, not hand it in. You can't do that, unfortunately. But you send it to me on Friday. And yeah. So do a good job on that. All right. So today we're going to talk about two major events of the 1990s that that wasn't a battle between Democrats and Republicans. That wasn't a battle between liberals, conservatives, Clinton, Gingrich, but were very important. If you were an American in 1995, it was impossible to escape mention of these two events that we're going to talk about. Hopefully, we'll get to both. If not, then I'll make another video. Yes, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton and their battles back and forth dominated the political headlines. But two things happened in 1995 that were also political, but also reflected so many divides in American life. Racially, gender, celebrity, a whole bunch of stuff. And those two events are the O.J. Simpson trial and the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, a lot of you guys might know a little bit about the O.J. trial, which we'll talk about today, but the Oklahoma City bombing is been unfortunately forgotten about. But it was the worst terrorist attack America had ever experienced up to that time until 9/11, and it killed 168 Americans. And it was committed by a fellow American who was driven by extreme right wing. Well, I don't even know if that's fair to say, but extreme, um, you know, anti-government feeling, which was strong in America in the 1990s. So we had mainstream conservatives who were taking over Congress, Newt Gingrich and all that. But then we talked about in the last video, but there was a strong conservative cultural element in America as well. This was the birth of right-wing talk radio. Fox News was starting at this time. So there was like a strong right wing, and in many cases ultra right wing cultural element in America that existed in the 1990s, and people who were very extreme in that philosophy, people who were like anti-government zealots, formed militias. There were 800 militias in the United States in the 1990s. They were particularly driven by the issue of gun control because they felt that the government was about to take away our guns. And some other things that happened in the 1990s that we'll talk about. All right. Now, if we were in class, I'd show you a great documentary about the O.J. Simpson trial. You can actually check it out on YouTube if you want to learn more. It's a CNN documentary, O.J. Simpson trial, which is just like a summary of of the trial from start to finish. It's about 40 minutes, but it covers this 16-month saga very well in these 40 minutes. So let me try to do it. Probably not as well as CNN did it in their documentary, but O.J. Simpson was one of the biggest celebrities, certainly sports celebrities in the United States. O.J. Simpson had played for the Buffalo Bills for most of his career. He had won the Heisman Trophy as a college player. He then became a celebrity pitchman. He was the spokesman for Avis Cars. He also had done some acting. He was in the Naked Gun movies. O.J. Simpson was a strong cultural presence in the United States throughout the 1970s and 1980s. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say, but he was America's biggest sports celebrity in the 1970s. Not as well known by the 1990s, but he was still seen pretty often as a sports commentator. And O.J. Simpson, he was African American, and his image was, excuse me, was squeaky clean, kind of all American type of image. He played golf. He lived in Brentwood, which is the fancy, predominantly white suburb of Los Angeles. He was a Republican. He had taken lessons on how to sound more white. So he was not really part of the community, the black community in any way. And that's an important point because O.J. Simpson kind of became a figure that a lot of African Americans rallied around after he got in trouble. Well, O.J. Simpson was divorced from his wife, ex-wife, Nicole Simpson. And Nicole Simpson and O.J. Simpson have been divorced for 2 years, but as it often goes in divorce situations, they broke up, then got back together, then broke up and got back together. It was kind of a back and forth sort of thing. Nicole Simpson was quite a bit younger than O.J. Simpson. She was also white. Which is also important to the story, as we start talking more about the trial. Um, Now, on June 12th, 1994, I remember this really clearly. My mom had taken me, McDonald's or something, and I just had found this out, because it was playing on the radio in McDonald's. O.J. Simpson's ex-wife Nicole, she was brutally killed in the foyer of her home. Her throat was slashed like almost from ear to ear. It was a vicious killing. And along with Nicole Simpson, a friend of hers named Ron Goldman, who's a 25-year-old waiter in a restaurant that Nicole Simpson frequented, he was also found stabbed to death alongside Nicole Simpson. What was Ron Goldman doing there? People thought all sorts of things. But Ron Goldman was friendly with Nicole. He was a waiter in the restaurant where she had just had dinner with her mom, and her mom left her sunglasses in the restaurant. So Ron Goldman was just trying to be a good guy and bringing her mom's glasses over to her house, Nicole's house, on his way home. And when he did that, he bumped into Nicole Simpson being killed, and the murderer, then killed Ron Goldman. So it was a vicious, vicious killing. Now, O.J. Simpson was actually, well, not really, but O.J. Simpson, was going to actually leave L.A. that night. He had some business engagement in Chicago, and the limousine driver went to go pick O.J. up and kept ringing the bell, no answer. Then he said in his testimony later at the trial, he said he heard a loud thumping sound, like something hitting a wall. And then after that thumping sound, the limo driver rang again, and this time O.J. Simpson answered, and he said, "I overslept. I was taking a nap, and I'll be right down." Because the limo driver was going to take him to the airport and the flight to Chicago. So what was that loud thump? That was followed by OJ answering the bell when he hadn't before. That became an issue. That became an issue in the trial as well. So OJ then flew to Chicago, where he was called and told that Nicole Simpson, his ex-wife, had been killed. They shared two children. The children were actually in the house when Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman were killed. He immediately flew back to Los Angeles, and they questioned him. This became an issue in the trial too, because one of the cops who was questioning O.J. Simpson actually said, "Well, we just questioned him as a routine matter, like he wasn't a suspect at that time in the killing." But that really was not believable, because when a woman is killed, the husband or boyfriend or ex-husband, ex-boyfriend is always the main suspect, because that's unfortunately usually the person who committed the crime when a woman is killed. So that was a bit of a fib, and that actually came back to hurt the case against O.J. Simpson later on. Well, 4 days passed. Finally, the LAPD felt confident enough in O.J. Simpson's guilt to charge him with double murder for killing Nicole Simpson and for killing Ron Goldman. They had found blood in his car, blood that matched Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman's blood. They found a bloody sock in his room that had Nicole Simpson's blood on it. They found blood at the crime scene that actually matched O.J. Simpson's DNA, because they requested a blood sample from him when he first got back from Chicago. So his blood was at the murder scene. His hat was in the murder scene with hair, that turned out to be his. There was the victim's blood in his car, and then there was the victim's blood in his house. But probably the biggest piece of evidence against O.J. Simpson was the fact that there was a bloody glove found at the murder scene. And then when the cops, a cop named Mark Furman, who was an LAPD detective, when he went to go search OJ's house, he found a matching bloody glove beside a wall in OJ's house, which was the same place that limo driver had heard that thumping sound. On the night of the murder. So they found a glove at the scene, and they found another bloody glove at OJ's house. So the evidence was pretty damning. When O.J. Simpson found out he was going to be arrested, it was June 17th, 1994. He decided to flee. His best friend, Al Cowlings, actually drove him. I don't know where exactly, but they were just driving away. They found in the car, they found a fake beard, they found a passport, they found $8,000 in cash. And the thing is, OJ was taking off, and he was called. The LAPD finally got track of him, and they literally engaged in a low speed chase of OJ Simpson through the highways of Los Angeles. It was unbelievable. Wall to wall coverage. If that was in class, I'd show you this, but you can check it out too if you want. O.J. Simpson chase, where O.J. Simpson was literally on the run, fleeing, chased by the LAPD. This got wall to wall coverage. Every station was covering this. Event. It was surreal. It was like almost something out of a TV show or a movie. Al Cowlings is driving OJ through the highways of LA. The cops are following him. Finally, they make their way back to OJ Simpson's house, where he's arrested for murder, double murder, for killing Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. Now, the evidence was pretty overwhelming. But the thing is that O.J. Simpson was extremely wealthy, right? As we would figure, being a professional athlete and, having been a celebrity pitchman in movies, being a sports announcer, he was very, very wealthy. So he hired the best lawyers in the country, tons of them. He had 9 lawyers representing him. And it was some really famous names. Robert Shapiro was a famous celebrity lawyer. F. Lee Bailey, who for another generation of Americans who remember the 60s and 70s, he actually was F. Lee Bailey was probably the biggest criminal defense lawyer in America. But probably most importantly, he hired a lawyer named Johnny Cochran. Now, Johnny Cochran was also a celebrity lawyer. He'd represented Michael Jackson in the child molestation situation the year before, and Johnny Cochran was also known as being a civil rights lawyer, somebody who took the cases of a lot of black celebrities. Now, the basic defense that O.J. Simpson waged was based on race, basically basically saying straight out that the LAPD had framed O.J. Simpson for the murder of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. And the thing is that that was really their response to the fact that there was also this overwhelming amount of DNA evidence against O.J. Simpson. The victim's blood in his car, the victim's blood at his house, his blood at the murder scene, his hair at the murder scene. So their answer was that, well, the LAPD had framed him. They also were alleging a contamination of evidence. That was another charge that they had, that they made. But the biggest piece of it, the biggest argument the defense had was a racial argument, that he was framed for these murders because he was black. Now, what evidence was there for this? Well, none. There wasn't. But two things really worked in OJ's favor when they're waging this defense. One was the fact that Mark Furman, the police officer detective who found the bloody glove at the murder scene that matched the bloody glove. He found the bloody glove at O.J. Simpson's house that matched the bloody glove that was found at the murder scene. Mark Furman had a reputation of being a bad cop, of being a racist cop, and who had said all sorts of horrible things about African Americans. F. Lee Bailey got Mark Furman on the stand and he asked him point blank, have you ever used the N word against black people? And Mark Furman said, no, I have never used that word, ever. So the thing is that Mark Furman, of course, had used this word. Mark Furman had a reputation for being pretty notorious racist on the LAPD. They ultimately found tape recordings that Mark Furman had done with a screenwriter because he was providing like some sort of like advice to to the to some screenwriter who was writing a movie about a movie script about the police, and he used the N word 62 times on these tapes when he's doing this interview with this screenwriter. So the fact that Mark Furman, the man who found the glove, was a racist and a liar too, right? He had said he had never said it, and then clearly he had. Really was a big boom to OJ's defense, saying that, well, obviously this man can't be trusted, so his evidence can't be taken seriously. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, you'll never really understand the O.J. Simpson trial if you don't understand the Rodney King beating and subsequent LA riots in 1992. We talked about that in class. Rodney King, he was a motorist. He was beaten really badly by the cops. It was taped, but the cops were ultimately acquitted. Horrible riots broke out in Los Angeles. 55 people were killed in these riots. There was a reputation the LAPD had of being a very racist police department. And there was still, this is only 2 years later, 2.5 years later, a tremendous amount of anger about what had happened, what went down with Rodney King, about him being beaten and the cops being let off. So the thing is that you kind of have to understand just how much that influenced a lot of people in LA, especially the black community in LA. The fact that we're always getting a bum deal from the LAPD, that they're a racist police force that's violent and just basically can't be trusted. Now, also, OJ's trial actually happened in downtown LA instead of West Los Angeles, where the murder took place. Downtown LA was going to have a much larger population of black people than in Western Los Angeles. 8 of the jurors were African American in the OJ Simpson trial. So the thing is that probably the worst incident of all for the prosecution, the people who actually waging the case against O.J. Simpson, was when they actually had O.J. Simpson try on the bloody gloves. The one that was found at the murder scene, the other one that was found at his home. He put on the gloves, and the gloves didn't fit. And then OJ went like this, see, they don't fit, which really helped his defense. It was a really stupid move by the prosecution to actually have him try on the gloves, even though there are many explanations for why the gloves did not fit. One, they were soaked in blood, and that shrivels up the gloves. They were leather gloves. Also, O.J. Simpson had bad arthritis, and the thing is that he actually, had if he didn't take his medicine for a few days, like his joints would start swelling. So and he was also wearing latex gloves underneath the glove. Well, he wore latex gloves, and then he put on the murder scene gloves, and that of course created a tighter fit. So there are a lot of explanations for why these gloves didn't fit, but if you just saw it, then clearly you would say, well, how could these gloves be his? They don't even fit. And that became the closing line that the defense used in the trial. Johnny Cochran said, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Johnny Cochran was quite the showman and a very, very good lawyer. And this was ultimately successful, this defense. Now, America was so polarized racially. The overwhelming majority on this issue, maybe on many issues, but especially here, the overwhelming majority of white Americans believe that O.J. Simpson was guilty, that he had committed these murders, while the overwhelming majority of black Americans felt that he was innocent. And it was really terrible, because O.J. Simpson is the least likely person to actually be, the center of a lot of sympathy with the African American community because of his past life. Basically living, not a life that was outside the black community in every possible way, even though he was African American. But for a lot of black people, they believed the fact that, yeah, the LAPD can't be trusted. They're a dirty police department. Look what they had done to Rodney King. Look what they have done for decades to black people. Look at what Mark Furman had said on tape. So a lot of people just believe these allegations against the LAPD, because of the history of the LAPD. O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of the murders, of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. But I don't know if this is still true, but because it's almost 25 years ago. It is 25 years ago. But there was never before that more evidence ever against one criminal suspect as there was against O.J. Simpson. Right? His DNA, his blood at the murder scene, the victim's blood in his car, the victim's blood in his house. It was his hair at the murder scene. It was overwhelming evidence. And I remember this. I was really, really young, but I remember when the verdict came down, the response was just so racial. So white people were despondent at what had happened, generally. Black people generally were exhilarated by the fact that O.J. Simpson was let off. And was found not guilty, even though he said after he was let off, he said, "I will spend the rest of my life trying to find the real killer." So we'll tell you how that works out. So the case was just so disappointing because the thing is, it turned out to be about things unrelated to the victims themselves, right? We had two people who were brutally murdered. Nicole Simpson was 35 years old. Ron Goldman was 25 years old when they were murdered. It became less about them and more about everything else. Race. OJ was white. I was black. Framed by a corrupt racist police department. Nicole was white. So he had an interracial marriage. Ron Goldman was also white. Who was killed. O.J. Simpson was a huge celebrity, so celebrity actually made this case get wall-to-wall coverage. Like literally, I spent the entire summer in 1995. I didn't want to go to camp because I literally wanted to watch the O.J. Simpson trial, which was covered gavel to gavel on CNN. So it was, and of course it got this attention because OJ was such a famous celebrity. So we had race, we had celebrity, we had sex and violence, sports. So many of the things that kind of that kind of like influence American life. All those things we just talked about were all at play in the OJ trial, and it turned out a lot more about that than it turned out about the victims. But the O.J. Simpson trial, they call it the trial of the century, was a major cultural milestone in the United States. The interesting postscript, O.J. Simpson was let off, but 13 years later, he found out that some antiques dealers were actually hawking memorabilia from him that he thought was stolen. He came with friends of his to get the stuff back. One of the friends allegedly had a gun. He closed the door and he wouldn't let the people leave until he got his stuff back. And ultimately, OJ was arrested for this. For kidnapping because he wouldn't let them go, and for armed robbery, and he got a 9-year prison sentence for this, and he served 9 years in prison for this offense. And a lot of people thought, well, was this really about taking his own stuff back, or was this some sort of way to try to make up for getting away with murder 13 years earlier? O.J. Simpson was let out of prison in 2017, and he's living his life now, apparently. But this was really, really terrible. Just personally, my own personal view, I thought that it was absolutely clear that O.J. Simpson committed these crimes. The evidence was so overwhelming against him. How is Ron Goldman's blood in his car? He didn't even know Ron Goldman, right? How is his blood at the murder scene? How is Nicole Simpson's blood on socks in his bedroom? We could go on and on. There was so much evidence. And then there were bloody footprints for a shoe called Bruno Magli shoes, which is a designer Italian shoe. They saw the bloody footprint of Bruno Magli shoes. OJ said, "I would never wear such ugly ass shoes." But then they found a picture, but this was after the trial. They found a picture of OJ Simpson wearing Bruno Magli shoes. They also found a picture of him wearing gloves. These gloves, which ironically had been bought for him by Nicole Simpson. All right, guys. So in our next video, we're going to talk about the Oklahoma City bombing, which also happened in 1995. It was another absolutely tragic event that I think deserves a lot more attention, but has been forgotten about after 9/11, which took so many more lives. But we it really deserves a discussion, as well as the political environment that basically contributed to this horrible attack on our country. All right, guys. So remember, hold your paper in on Friday, and I'll see you in the next video.